When you give birth to a company, it's not just a business that is a financial statement. You're actually weaving yourself into all aspects of that organization. The deeper shift that we're seeing is confusion, people not knowing what to do. As you would expect in any sort of major innovative period of time, there's a lot of buzz, a lot of early adopters, many of them making mistakes, wasting money. There are definitely some great advantages that AI provides.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tuesdays with Trailblazers, brought to you by AdTech Edge, a video podcast where we bring you the latest trends and insights in advertising and technology. I'm your host, Sidesh, and today we have with us Scott Goodson, founder at StrawberryFrog. Scott is a titan of the global advertising industry who's transformed the agency into a worldwide powerhouse, with philosophy of movement marketing. So without further ado, let's welcome Scott. Hey, Scott, how are you doing today?
I said, I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Well, we're quite excited to see what wonderful insights you have for us, Scott.
Looking forward to the conversation.
Great. So I want to start with somewhere personal, Scott, because I think most people, when they hear someone offer to buy your company, they immediately jump to the money, right? So the spreadsheet version of this decision, but I have a feeling the real story is a lot more complicated than that. So what does this mean?
I'm going to tell you something secret in a second that I think everyone who starts a company needs to know. And it's something that I learned after almost 30 years of starting and running my own business. And that is that when you give birth to a company, it's not just a business that is a financial statement. You're actually weaving yourself into all aspects of that organization. It's very difficult to divorce that from the financial statement. Imagine you've given birth to this beautiful child that you love, you care for, you protect, and then you make that transaction, and all of a sudden, someone else is optimizing your child. It becomes a really difficult thing to accept. I think also we don't run businesses purely for financial gain. If it was only a transactional objective, life would be pretty unfulfilling. I know someone, for instance, who's a serial entrepreneur. They're very unhappy. They just buy and sell all the time, or sell and sell all the time, I should say. And he's 3 times divorced. He just never seems to be happy. So I think it's a deeper, more philosophical challenge than simply about making money.
Now, here's what I find interesting. Staying independent is often treated as the default, right? But for you, independence is actually a deliberate competitive move. So, what does lean into independence actually look like from the inside?
Well, when you're independent, you can take on clients that really reflect your view of the world. And some of those clients maybe in the short term don't deliver the type of, EBITDA that you would look for or be, let's say, pushed to take on if you were owned by a separate company. If the business objective is financial growth quarter after quarter, it's very different leadership challenge than if you're stewarding an independent organization where you get to choose your clients carefully. Clients which are, I'm talking about a professional services sector, obviously increasingly integrated with AI, but nevertheless still professional services. In that type of business, it's so much more about building clients that reflect your way you look at the world. And if you do that in a thoughtful way, you end up with a high performing, highly profitable business that delivers gifts back to you as the owner time and time again over many years. We're about to be 30 years old. I hate saying that. It's so bizarre. I feel like I just started this thing like yesterday, already almost 30 years. And, during that time, obviously we've had ups and downs, but being the captain of your own ship is a much more fulfilling. It's also, I always tell clients, it's the least risky choice. So if a client wants to hire, the perception of you can hire the big corporate firms, that's the least risky choice. Well, no, it's quite the opposite. The smaller, more nimble, more innovative firms that have their ears to the market and are dependent on innovation to be relevant and continue to be relevant. Those firms are going to be infinitely more valuable to you than a big corporation with thousands of employees across the globe.
Got it. Now, Scott, let's talk about pattern recognition because you made some early calls in healthcare, wealth, AI before those became the obvious places to be. So, what were you paying attention to that other people want?
When you build a business that is in the solutions business, number one, and number two, when you have a very specific offering, as we do at Strawberry Frog, which is this idea that for centuries, the most powerful organizing principle in society, the framework that actually drives humans to actually do something is movement. Societal movement has been with us since man first came out of the Fertile Crescent 10,000 years ago. That is a framework that has moved billions of people to do things. If you have that as your approach, which is our approach, which we've done for 30 years and been very successful across many, many different categories. We did the launch of Google, that small little tech startup back in the late 90s. We did the global Emirates airline business. We've done Walmart. We've done, these huge corporations in different categories. If you can do that really well, then you can go into categories that need the solutions and the movement. So health was a natural evolution for us. It's very purpose driven. It's a very unusual sector in the United States. I think it's very different than India and probably every other country on the planet. In the United States, health systems compete against other health systems. And the reason is because most of the profit that these health systems need to thrive comes from a very small percent of the population who use those systems for elective surgery. So you want those high net worth, valuable customers to your health system because it pays for a lot of other things. That's a oversimplification, but important nevertheless. So we are valuable to health systems to help them compete against others in their market. And today we work with 5 of the largest health systems in the United States in different parts of the country, largest in New York, Connecticut, largest in New Jersey, largest in Texas, etc. And we were able to bring this idea of movements to the health system sector. We started with probably the most admired system. Think of it as the Mahindra or the Apple of health systems in terms of how admired they are in the domestic market. And when we did it really well for them, then a lot of other health systems started calling us. And the results were quite extraordinary. The leadership of one of the health systems used the econometric study annually to put a value on what we've created for them, which is approximately $3 billion of net new revenue for the work that we did annually. So, you can make a significant impact in the growth trajectory of any industry, of course, but in particular in the health space, when you are focused on solutions, when you apply this concept of movement marketing, is that it did plus up our approach. So there's many ways that movement is still highly valuable, but now can be significantly more effective through the use of AI.
So I wanted to understand, and I wanted to pick up on something you said earlier about being small, senior, and fast, right? So I think so how do you push back on that?
Well, what is everyone saying today? Everyone's saying that they're looking for the next billionaire in the United States will probably be a one-person company. So if you think about where the world was 30 years ago, if you were starting a company, regardless of what you did, let's say you were in the, beauty products space, you're making beauty products, you would have to come up with a product. You would have to come up with a scent. You would have to come up with the packaging. You would have to come up with the warehousing and distribution. You would have to come up with the value proposition and the strategy to go to market. You'd have to do all those things inside your company. Today, everything I just mentioned can be outsourced, and you can buy and sell based on having partners that can manage a lot of virtually everything I just mentioned. That's a very simple way of thinking about it, but apply any complex way of thinking, any complex advantage today is probably coming from outside your business. So if you think about that, being a small and nimble strategic partner to the senior most executives of a company, helping them understand they're coming up with a differentiated value proposition, positioning, mission, BHAG, all those things, and being able to pull in different top of the category partners to execute, which we can do, you can be much more efficient and more effective that way. instead of having to have it in-house, there's a lot of arguments that, okay, if we have it in-house, it's a strategic advantage. And some aspects of that may be true, but a lot of it can be, obviously, depending on the sector. Obviously, you can't outsource a lot of what health systems do. And there's obviously some industries that are highly regulated, like health and finance. But so you do need a lot of experts inside those businesses, but you can still benefit from a small and nimble strategic advisor who is able to moves fast and has a 30-year track record working with the most significant and admired companies in the world.
So let's talk about the thing everyone's talking about. And I want to go past the version of this conversation because we've all heard AI is going to automate tasks. What's the deeper shift you're actually seeing?
The deeper shift that we're seeing is confusion, people not knowing what to do. As you would expect in any sort of major innovative period of time, there's a lot of buzz, a lot of early adopters, many of them making mistakes, wasting money. I think there are definitely some great advantages that AI provides. A couple of simple ones are having your own insights machine, which you can build pretty easily on Claude. You can churn through mountains of data and get an incredibly accurate understanding of your market. So the insights part is super valuable. The execution on those insights can be mechanized today. In fact, we can also personalize. We did a global campaign for Visa last year that delivered 20,000 unique, customized, and personalized advertising to people on a global basis. That was not possible before. And then thirdly, it can be used to execute. We're, today probably done about a dozen campaigns. We just did a really cool launch, all AI generation. In other words, all the video, all the static imagery, everything is created by the AI. That was done for the launch of something called Sports Predict, which is partnering with one of the most admired financial trading companies in the United States called Jump Trading. And they just launched during the World Cup a competition called the Jump Trading Probability Cup, where people from all over the world can compete based on their prediction skills. Who's going to win in the World Cup? Their prediction, they can go in and they can demonstrate how effective and successful they are at predicting who's going to win which games. And the winners of that are going to come into Jump Trading and be offered the opportunity to help trade $1 million. And headline is, it's really a new way of recruiting top talent to the world's most impressive financial firms. Everything we've done has been done with AI. So there's a lot of things we can do today. Having said that, one of the most admired and successful global AI enterprise transformation companies called Infosys, which is an Indian company based in Bangalore, but has huge business in the United States. We just were selected by them to do their global marketing launch, coming up with original, powerful, strategic platforms that can help these companies such as Infosys grow still is valuable. And that's what we do as well. So the point I was making about that is all these amazing things are happening in terms of AI, but still the root value that we can provide is a smart and differentiated strategy that helps companies grow, i.e. solve their business problems.
It's wonderful. Now, I want to spend some time on this idea of movement thinking because when I first heard the phrase, I thought I understood it. And then the more I sat with it, I realized it's quite different from how most people think about brands. So, what's the right version?
Well, most people think that the way you do marketing is to come up with a creative idea that you then put into the market by means of buying media, and that will attract a customer. And what I think we're missing in that particular context is the world is not dominated today by television advertising. There are 1,000 ways that people are gaining information, that they're seeking insights and entertainment. And a lot of those are on Reddit, Reddit in 1,000 different platforms. So it becomes increasingly difficult to push advertising out. So a movement, think about any movement, the women's movement that is, reshaping Korea as we speak. Any movement, any mass movement, whether it's political, social, business, cultural, all those movements, instead of pushing messages to those people, movement pulls them in. The old model is interruption. You buy attention, you broadcast this to a wide audience, you measure impressions. The whole thing evaporates when the budget ends. A movement is the opposite. It's like a tornado that never stops, built on a shared belief, not repetition. It doesn't ask, what do we want to say? It asks, what do we want people to do? Campaigns have an end date, movements have momentum. And so that, in a very simple way, really establishes the difference between the two. Advertising, traditional advertising is passive and belief is active. That's the real key difference. So if you can stand for an idea on the rise, I'll give you a good example. There's a highly admired Indian company called Mahindra. About a decade ago, I had the fortune of working with the chairman, and by the name Anand Mahindra, who's an absolutely extraordinary individual. I think he won the Ernst & Young Businessman of the Year many, many years in a row. So he's highly respected. And he reached out to me and said, hey, would you have dinner? I'd like to talk to you about something. So we met. And over dinner, we talked about the fact that he had a confederation of companies and that he believed that there was a value in uniting them, but that it was a very difficult thing to do, because it's one of those types of businesses that has everything from aerospace to tractors to baby retail outlets to travel destinations. So it covers every sector. So how do you bring, so different companies together under one point of view? And what they were doing, which a lot of companies do for when they're trying to solve this, is sit around a table with a lot of smart people and say, how do we tell the world what we are? How do we express to the world what this incredible dynamic company is so that we attract more people to buy what we make? And of course, the minute they did that, a lot of the CEOs would get in arguments. Well, our customer in the baby sector is very different than the customer of Mahindra Tech, which is true. And so for years, they never were able to come up with a unified point of view. I live in New York, but I'm actually originally Canadian. And in Canada, we have a confederation of independent provinces that have one flag. One thing I learned about Canada is we don't try to define what we do so much as align with an idea on the rise in culture that feels relevant to a large group of people. And that's what I said to him. I said, we need to have a strong purpose and we need to activate that purpose with a movement that really crystallizes how people are feeling today around the world. And the movement we came up with was called Rise. And Rise was this understanding that everyone in the world, whether they're in South Africa or Chile or in the southern states of the United States that were buying all these Mahindra tractors, or in Turkey or in Sri Lanka, everywhere is a desire to rise above your current place in the world. And that was a really relevant movement idea for Mahindra for a number of reasons. And I won't get into too much about it, but we were able, with that idea, to unify the company, to engage all these different customers on a global basis, to increase learning between divisions and so forth. And today, if you look up on Mahindra.com, you'll see Rise is still proudly front and center as their tip of their spear in terms of how they think about not only engaging customers, but product innovation, how they think about their own internal culture. So movement is not just a powerful marketing strategy, it's also a cultural differentiator in terms of how you change your organization, increase performance, increase confidence, lots of other problems that plague big companies. I don't know if that's too much inside information, but I think it's a great example of how a movement can really grow a business.
Absolutely. I think it was spot on in terms of the example as well, and some wonderful insights out there. Now, Scott, let's talk about leadership. And I'm curious, when you think about the leaders who are navigating this movement well, what do they actually have that others don't?
So, what is the difference between successful leadership today and not successful leadership? I think the answer is obviously you've got to be smart and understand, basic operational levers. Are you making money? Are you losing money? The whole point of running a company is if I use the metaphor of a boat, you want your boat to go faster. And as the CEO, you don't want to create holes in the back of your boat where water pours in and everything slows down and distracts you from moving faster. That's the overall sort of job of a leader. But in today's world, I think it's more than that. Successful leadership requires a great communicator. You really need to understand the way the world is being shaped by ideas and how well you communicate. In the past, I don't know, as long as I've been doing this, the common CEO profile was accountant, someone who grew up in the finance space and took over as CEO because the board felt like, we need a responsible financial person at the top of the company. And you can see that in every category. I think you're seeing that still, but I think you're seeing also communicators being put in that role because they're really good at communicating to the market. They're really good at communicating to their employees. They're really good at communicating to their customers and all other stakeholders. Great communicators can do magic. And I've seen it firsthand with many of the clients that we work with. And I think what we do to help them is help them understand the power of movement in their toolbox. So a very simple example, in today's world, the new generation do not accept the idea that a CEO gives them a mandate. In other words, historically, a CEO would come in and say, jump. Everybody would salute the CEO and say, how high? Today, you need to create this concept that, like a movement, we are doing this because we all believe in it and we all believe that it's going to make our work and this company better. So there's a we component, a different mindset. Otherwise, they'll leave and go to another company. Yes, of course, they need clear guidelines in terms of what they're expected to do. But in addition to that, you need their mental buy-in. That's where a movement can make a big difference. If they feel like they're part of something that they're actually helping to build, that is going to go a long way versus when they're being ordered to follow mandates. Basic philosophy is a huge differentiator in successful leadership today. Like in the case of Mahindra that I just gave you, right? Anand led a confederation of independent companies. In fact, I was joking with him one day. I said, you should really call the company 1-800 Mahindra because there were like 800 different companies all competing with each other with different strategies and different value propositions and different positionings. I said, can you imagine if you could harness all that in one focused thing? It's like basic physics. Force over surface equals pressure. If you can focus, you break through. If you ever, I think that, is a good example. And it was about getting their leadership to buy in as opposed to him mandating, this is what's going to happen.
Well, that's absolutely true. Now, Scott, last thing I want to get into, and I think it ties everything together. We all know about belief, about what people stand for, about culture, right? And I keep coming back to this one word, trust, because it feels like everything else is made of, right? So, and right now it's hard to learn. So, how do you break through that?
So great question. And I think it's really the key to everything that I've just been talking about. Trust is scarcity today. There's less and less trust in corporations, in government, in all aspects of our life. So trust is the true scarcity. It's like diamonds, or perhaps more valuable than diamonds, actually. So the approach that I've been talking about is really designed around building trust. Trust with your employees, trust with your stakeholders, your customers, because advertising is manipulation. I mean, we are in the business of creating an architecture within which people give up their hard-earned money, right? That's the business person's dilemma. How do I manipulate the customer to give me his money that he or she worked so hard to make because they feel they need to? Like, for example, I'm in love with a woman. I really do love her. Well, you show her by buying her a diamond, and you're spending your hard-earned money on that diamond. That's a made-up thing. Wasn't humans don't need diamonds when they're getting married. It was created by a marketing company. So we are all in the business of creating an architecture within which we motivate people to give up money for something. And every moment of our lives has been reviewed and thought through, and from birth to death. How do we get people in all aspects to give up their money? And in many respects, over the last 80 years, that's been primarily through manipulation. That is paid creative advertising. I think what movement is about is yes, it certainly is still manipulation for sure, but it's much more about building trust, because brands can't create movements. They crystallize a movement that's already existing in society. They're helping people realize something they innately feel. And by doing so, they build trust with that group of people, whether it's investors, employees, or buying customers. So movement is a little more about trust than manipulation in creative advertising, because in effect, it's understanding what people intuitively feel, or a wrong that needs to be righted, for example, problem in the world that really needs to be solved, that we as a community want to solve. That's something that people feel. So they want to be part of that. So the whole movement framework is designed to build deeper trust in leadership, in the company, among all sorts of stakeholders. That's what I would say is the key differentiator around about trust.
Well, very, very well said, Kumar. Now, let's shift some gears and we'll do a rapid fire session. So, majorly one word answers or short answers only. So, whenever you're ready.
Yep.
Okay, great. Independence or a big acquisition check?
Independence.
AI as a tool or AI as a teammate?
AI as a teammate.
Okay. You can only keep one. Okay. A small team that moves fast or a big team with every resource you need. Which do you take?
I mean, that's an easy one. I would go with the safest choice, the small, nimble team.
Great. I, for some reason, knew that answer already. Okay. Now, the moment you knew movement thinking was real, was it something a client said, something you saw, or something you felt?
Something I saw. I'm Canadian. I moved to Sweden back in the 80s. I know that's 1,000 years ago. And what I saw in Sweden were these they were big regional Swedish companies that were building out their businesses globally. And they were very good we didn't call it movement in those days, but it was really a movement. So IKEA, for example, the furniture company, which I worked with for many years, we were building a movement. And I saw with my own eyes how a value-based brand that crystallized what people were thinking and were using behavioral economics before it was a thing in order to come up with powerful, engaging strategies was really making a huge difference in terms of their growth. The Swedes were able to do it on a global basis faster and cheaper than the big behemoths coming from the United States, England, and France. The Swedes always did it smarter, faster, cheaper, and better. And they did it because they, in effect, were purpose-based companies that were engaging people in a movement framework. So I saw that with my own eyes in the 80s, and that really led me to crystallize this concept of movement thinking, which is the backbone of the two books that I've written. One is called Uprising. The second is called Activate Brand Purpose. And both of those talk about how movements can be used as a tool to solve a lot of company problems.
Great. I think that was the perfect conclusion to today's podcast. Thank you so much, Scott, for all the wonderful insights.
I love it. Appreciate the chance to be here, and hopefully we can do an in-person session in Pune sometime.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you to all our viewers for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, subscribe and leave us a review. Until next time, stay tuned with AdTech Edge for more insights. Till we meet again, signing off, your host, Siddharth.